The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. It's the top of the hour, so I will start the presentation. This is a special holiday presentation webinar that we're giving. It's all about how we brought or helped in assisting bringing modern identity to the North Pole to help Santa deliver all the products that he delivers every year. So I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully you'll find some concepts here that you can apply to other things other than just North Pole delivery processes. And at the end, we'll have some, I'll answer some questions. And for some reason, it's not going forward. There it is. Why OCG? Well, if you're looking for any type of project that needs to have identity and security integrated with it, we can help provide that assistance. We provide planning, deployment services, as well as providing managed services. Here's the overview slide. If you've seen our webinars before, you've seen this before, but we do a really good job in making sure that everything is secure in your environment and integrating that with modern identity processes. As far we were involved with this project to help modernize the delivery processes and identity processes within the North Pole and its holiday delivery processes. And basically, these are some of the things that I'm going to present here today. Some of the goals. Why do we want to modernize the process? I'm going to show you in a little bit of detail the previous pre-solution processes and how the new processes are implemented. Show you how the implementation team is set up and the different tasks applied to them. And part of that process is the discovery. And then once we discover, we try to optimize those processes, bring in new technologies when needed, develop an architecture, and then we deliver the final solution. First, I'm going to talk about our implementation team. Well, our implementation team is composed of three different vendors. We were one of those vendors. We were providing the identity and platform integration processes. NUCO Technologies. NUCO stands for Nuclear Corporation. You'll see how they've implemented some custom hardware to assist in the integration of our solution. And then we had a set of local developers to the North Pole. They're called HollyAid. They were helpful in creating the APIs and integrating with the artificial intelligence environment that we were integrating with. And AID stands for Artificial Intelligence and Development. The overall solution development is what we always do as part of our engagements. We first go through a discovery process where we have to analyze the current environment as well as the requirements of any new implementations. And after we get that, we have a design and architect phase where we look at all the discovery aspects and put that together into a system that we can create and design. And after that, we build it and test it out. And hopefully at that point, the solution will be there and the client will be happy. So as part of this engagement, discovery was a primary aspect of it because we had to look to see exactly how the environment was set up. How do kids get their lists to Santa Claus? How do those items that they request, how are they put together, and how does Santa eventually deliver those? And we've come up with, after the initial discussions, we found out that these were some of the processes involved. There's, you've heard that he knows when you've been sleeping, he knows when you're awake, and that's referring to Santa Claus. Well, there's actually a process behind that. We'll talk about that. And then not only is there monitoring involved, but there's list aggregations from different input points We have department store Santas. Kids can mail in their letters. They can go to websites. And basically what comes out of that is a bunch of lists. And those lists have direct representations with products that need to be delivered. So Santa Claus actually has a local shop where he builds stuff. And he also has licensed products that he builds on site. And then there's an order processing aspect to it as well for those that are not produced on site. And of course, those all have to be packaged up and sent to the appropriate and delivered to the appropriate individual. And I'm going to talk about the problems with each one of these and how our team hope to bring this to a better solution, more efficient solution. So let's go over the pre-solution process of how these things are put together. The first is a good and bad list generation. The current process or the previous process before the solution, the kids are monitored by elves, and through quantum physics and quantum alignment, they have this special feature where they can sense kids and their belief in Santa Claus. So each one of these elves is assigned the task of keeping track of all those kids and keeping track of whether they're good or bad, whether they're awake or not, and as well as some location aspects, because they not only know the behavioral aspects of the child, but they also know where they're at. So there's a problem with that, though. You can only have up to 5,000 kids per elf. And that's an issue because there's a shortage. I'll bring up another slide here of some of the issues here. But those elves are basically, they manually create a list, and those lists are manually aggregated by other elves. And so some of the issues with that is that they do need to gather the user information, whether they're good or bad, because that ends up on the ultimate list. And they also have location information that assists in the delivery process. The issues are the good or bad error rate. The kids are good by default, and only if they've done something egregious that they are removed off the list. So the error rate in that they've calculated is greater than error percent, 80%, as well as the location error is greater than 80%. They can't be super precise, and they make mistakes when they're documenting these things. So that's where the error rate comes from. And of course, the other processes that I'm going to talk about later, those users, because they're different disparate data sources, those events don't line up. Those data points don't line up exactly. So there's greater than 90% error rate with that. In addition to that, there's an elf shortage. They're unable to keep up with global population and other things that deal with the lifespan of the elves and things like that. There's just not enough elves to support the entire the world. So they've been having issues with that. So the requirements are, of course, to improve the user alignments, improve location precision, and improve the good or bad determination, and basically provide overall efficiencies in monitoring. So that is a process that needs to be improved. The item list generation, here's another issue. Each elf is assigned to a department store Santa. They basically shadow that Santa Claus, and they manually transcript the data that is coming in and the lists that the kids want, as well as the kids themselves. They manually transcribe that. But of course, people can still send in their mail lists to Santa. Those have to be aggregated. Those are also manually transcribed. And there is also new input from websites. You can go to all different kinds of different websites where kids can input their lists, and those are all aggregated as well through the pipeline from those websites. That's more of a manual, an automated process, but there's still some issues because eventually it does become manually transcribed. And here are some of the issues with that. Again, there's greater than % errors. The alignment errors are greater than 85%. It's right around the 80% error rate on the average there. And the requirements, of course, is to improve this entire process. The other issue, once they have these lists, there are certain items on the list. And of course, when the kids write out these lists, they don't put exactly what they want. They may have an Xbox there. Well, what type of Xbox do they want? They may want a PS5. They may not be able to get a PS5 because there's not enough of them. There's not only the item itself that needs to be vetted out with a real item, but there's also a supply issue. And because there's on-premises manufacturing, they need to know with these lists, do they need to increase production? Do they need to decrease production? Do they have the current inventory? So all these items have to be associated with the real product, and the orders have to be aligned to the correct manufacturer. Do they have to order the stuff? Do they have to manufacture it with a licensed product on site, like Mattel, Hasbro? Those companies have local manufacturing sites at the North Pole. Or they also have legacy toy manufacturing where there's like wooden horses and wooden soldiers and things like that. It's not much of a demand of those anymore, but sometimes those get into the mix as well. And of course, they have issues. They overproduce items. Sometimes they underproduce items. And they also have to, once these things are produced, they have to create some kind of delivery package. Well, the delivery package has to be associated with the user. There's an error rate in that, and there's an error rate as well of do they make a mistake? Is there the right thing in the right package? And even though right now it's semi-automated, they do need to improve that as well. So this is a list, another box, the same box as before, but just some items that we're trying to keep track of the objects. The users, the first process, we get a user, whether they're good or bad, and we get a location. The second aspect is, okay, we have a user list aggregation from the department store Santa Clauses, from the mail-in lists, and from websites. We have to have some kind of list to user association as well as item to list association. We have to be able to deliver those packages, align the items with the lists, and finally, that has to be delivered. And of course, there has to be some type of efficient delivery system, because Santa Claus, even though he can go through and there's time distortion involved and stuff, he still has a long journey for himself that has to be optimized somehow. So we have to look at the locations, optimize his path, and also provide some type of delivery to location association to make that optimized as well. So what does a solution look like? Well, if you look at the solution domains, like I've already said, we've got all this disparate data. We have user properties, good or bad, where are they at, what items they have. There has to be a unique user, and they have multiple lists. Maybe you send in a list to Santa Claus, you have 15 lists that you give to him, as well as putting information in a website. So each user has multiple lists. There are items there that are disparate because you have the description of the item may not match. What is it? What does it match up the product? Then you have the products that you have to produce, and you have to have enough of them, at least a sufficient quantity to give to the kids. And then finally, the location where you're going to deliver that information. Maybe the kid moved around in December. You have to know where they're at right at the, when it's time to be delivered. So all these things have to be aligned up, and we have to find some kind of process to align all that disparate data, as well as kind of how are we going to expose that to the different processes. So the team got together and decided exactly how to do that. Well, one of the things we've decided to do is to basically standardize on the process, standardize on the hardware and software involved, standardize on APIs. So that's where HollyAid came in. They created these APIs to integrate with the different data points. And the integration itself because we have these different disparate data sources, there has to be some way to align them. That's where AI came in, as well as some deterministic processes, because you don't necessarily need a fancy AI if you're just going to align your location with a user and you have that data already. Like if a mail comes in, you possibly know where that location is. So that's just a logical thing. It doesn't take any type of intense data mining to find that out. And as well as we have to provide a way to manage that data. We have to have a place to put it, and we have to have a place that is coherent. The data has to be coherent to itself. So we have to have a user object, we have to have a list object, we have to have an item object. Those have to all be associated with each other in a logical way. This is a flow chart of basically what we've tried to do and what we succeeded in doing. We have these disparate data sources, and those sources need to be aligned. They need to be formatted. They have to be exposed in some way. And once they're exposed, then we have to integrate those with our processes somehow. And this is just a source of the data. Where is the data coming from? User monitoring, user requests, items come from all these different sources. We basically have two domains of alignment. We have our data alignment of users to lists, and then we have the items to the list for production. And on the far right, you see the different objects that we want to aggregate. And this is another data integration diagram of a little bit more concise version of what I just showed you. But ultimately what we decided to do is, as far as the platform for these unique identities and unique objects, we've decided to integrate that with the Microsoft's Dynamics 365 platform. So the user objects, those will all be in user tables within Dynamics 365, along with the list. There will be a single list, aggregated list per user. And the items, once you'll see how we aggregated the data, but those lists are associated with items by their product identifiers. So there is, within Microsoft Dynamics 365, there is an item to actual product table. And then with that, we can ingest the production data and the manufacturing data, the product data, and put all those into a single platform. And then we can expose that via Dynamics 365 to the different processes. And here I have two examples of processes: the creation and manufacturing of products, and then the user to product to delivery efficiency, which can be built on the data within Dynamics 365. So we divided this, another flow chart here, a lot of flow charts here. The overall processes of what we're trying to do. And so we decided to divide those up into different tasks. The yellow is the NUCO and Hollyade. They're going to integrate with that, create the APIs for that. OCG assisted in the actual formatting of the data. The green data are the data classes that we would eventually be in Dynamics 365. And what OCG helped with is actually aligning that data, integrating that data within Dynamics 365. And of course, Hollyade is the vendor that exposed those APIs, created those APIs to expose that data. And I'll just go into this a little bit more detail here of how this whole environment was redesigned. One thing that NUCO has done is created a quantum computer. It's not really a quantum computer as much as it's a quantum interface. Basically, the superpositions of the quantum integration that you get, that the elves were utilizing, they devised a mechanical way to do that. So basically, within the NUCO technology itself, it has the ability to associate different patterns to up to 50,000 users per device. So as one of the aspects or one of the benefits of doing this with a mechanical device rather than an animated or not human, but an elf device, something that has interaction, is that this is not necessarily qualitative, it's more quantifiable, so that there is some AI that's built into this that the Holly helped, or as Holly had the assistance of the elves with this, where let's say a person, whether a person is good or bad, you just can't say whether they lied, so they're bad. There has to be an intent behind it, or what's the situation. Well, these situational aspects were programmed in with the AI and the embedded programming of this quantum device, so that it depends on why they were lying. If they were lying to protect somebody for something good, then that would not be bad for them. So there's a lot of logic that's built into this. But eventually, out of this API would come the location of the user, and it's more up to date because there's an API that's interfaced with this. So you have the real-time aspect of the location, as well as a real-time aspect of whether they're good or bad. So that's one way that we can actually get that good data and up-to-date data from this API. So the benefits of this, well, you can read that if you want to read that, but the error rate, the good or bad error rate, went down to less than 99%. Location error is really good, 99%. It's no longer elf dependent, and there were no studies done to determine what's going to happen now when all these elves are unemployed. But there's no longer elf dependency on this process. So they save some effort. I guess they have a lot more elves to be involved with the manufacturing process. So anyway, these are some of the benefits of going to that platform. Data acquisition here. So the department store Santa, the elves are still shadowing them, but they have a My Santa application that's both a mobile and a web-based platform, so they can put that data in right away, and so there's no transcription issues with that. The mail lists are now scanned. Those are put into the user list database, as well as the information from My Santa application and the other inputs from the website. So there's a database tables for those things. Now, granted, at this point, all the things that you've seen before, as well as a good bad allocation and this, they're all still disparate data sources, but at least we have the actual data that we can deal with. So like I said, the database creation, you have these 3 different databases within this environment, as well as API interfaces that were integrated and developed by the Holly vendor. Data acquisition here. So this is where the real programming and where we helped and utilize the development skills of Holly to really get this going, to get a unique user. So we have the intent one device, which generates a unique user and a location for that user. And also, it's got a request initiation aspect of it, so it knows when the child is going to write a list or has initiated a list. There's an API that's exposed to that, and so we have a table there, a data table that has all those unique IDs along with the location and the request initiation time. The department store Santa table, again, we have some data input from that, as well as website integration. Well, these have to be joined together, and they're joined with the request initiation time. Because each one of the users on the left side here, I don't know, my mouse isn't appearing there, but the department store Santa, website integration, those are all user, they have locations, but at the time that happens, there's an intent flag And that intent flag is a request initiator. That request initiator then does some logic there where we join those to that so that we can associate the correct user with the intent device. And from this, we can get, of course, there's a identifier there for the lists. And so we do have a list association with this. So at least we can associate the unique user across these environments, and we can join them together and create a unique user. A little bit different processes involved with the mailed lists, because there's a location specificity problem, as well as a mail delay problem, because when the lists come in, they do have a timestamp from when they were postmarked, and there was an initial intent when that message was created, the mail itself was created, but there's a delay there, there's a mail delay, and the location isn't quite specific. So there's some AI involvement there. There's some AI code to look to see, hey, you know, what's the mail delivery time? You know, if it was mailed a month ago, well, if it was mailed a week ago and the intent was a month ago, well, that doesn't line up. So there is some AI involved with that. So that's an AI join process that was worked on for that. So we have these users here. And so we've created a unique user. So now the kids are unique. We know who they are, but they may have multiple lists as well as multiple items on those multiple lists. And those lists also may be, you know, some lists may have priority over other lists. So one of the things that Holiday did was create this, there were already APIs exposed to the from the on-premises manufacturing plants and the order partners, the purchasing partners that the North Pole has associations with. So they were all put together into a single item product database. So the database has all the products that are possible that Santa could deliver. So with that, we have the unique user coming in from the previous processes. So what we do here is we aggregate those lists from all those different environments, and we separate those out into the different items. And so we have separate tables for those, and those are joined with the lists that are produced by the APIs that I just showed you, and they're aligned via AI processes, contextual searches, things like that, to associate the items on the list with the actual product themselves. That's created, that's ingested and put into a single list, and that single list then is associated with the user. And so now we have a user, a single list, as well as identifiable products. And then there's the production logic that we can expose via the Dynamics 365 interface. And now the production environment, they have lists or items they can come in, they can compare it to what their production already is, they can estimate how much they need to produce. And so that's the exposure to that process there. We still have another problem we have to solve, and that's the ability to make the, one thing is the packaging of the items. There has to be some way to package those up. So through that, the Dynamics 365 base environment that we have, we can use that to join the environments together, the unique user, unique lists, create a packaging for them. And there's an inventory process that actually uses the Dynamics 365 data to be able to make sure the user, the items, and the package and the locations are all aggregated together. So at the end, there's a package of a user, the items that they requested. There's also an indicator that I didn't put there, that the package fulfillment, because everybody doesn't get all that they want. They try to make sure there's at least more than a 50% fill rate, but that's available too. That's exposed to the data, and as well as the location information for that package. That package needs to have an address associated with it. So we also have part of the Dynamics 365 data, all the location information. So that's put into an AI process, and a route map is calculated based on where Santa is at, or you can put any address in basically. It'll show you, hey, what's the next stop? And it goes through that process of making the destination the most efficient as possible. I'm missing a slide here. I don't think it's up here. Oh, no, there it is right there. Okay, so basically, we've got all these data points. We're putting them together, associate them with each other through APIs and Microsoft AI services. And finally, we get these data objects that are unique and segregated. Then we're putting that in Dynamics 365, and that integrates with the external processes. And what I wanted to show you here is, because of the data within Dynamics 365, we can, the Holly 8 has created a mobile app that Santa can take with him, as well as integrating with the sleigh interface. So the sleigh will know where to go, and Santa can see where he's going, as well as using the mobile app to make sure that where he's at, the right delivery package is given. But now, the whole process is there. We have the input, we have the analysis, we have the output. There's another requirement, though, is exposing this data to the end user. So the kids want to be able to go to some mobile app or so, go to some website. Hey, and they want to look up their information. Have they been good or bad? Maybe they want to update their list. Maybe they want to add something or remove something from their list. And maybe they want to see historical data, you know, that's possible. So that's one of the requirements that Santa and his team wanted us to do. So one of the requirements, really, we want to make sure that there's data security by making sure the kids are who they actually are. They want to be able to view their good and bad status. They want to be able to add, change, or remove items. They want to maybe put in their own custom delivery location. And they want to be able to expose the historical data as well. And they wanted to do this through a web and mobile application. And there are situations, I guess some kids have complained, I don't know, or parents have complained. They say they don't want Santa Claus delivering anything to their kid. So we have to have a process of removing that user data and deleting that information if by chance someone signed up and changed their mind. So that means we have to build some kind of interface to this that provides modern authentication and authorization. And the logical thing for that is to use Azure AD B2C. That has an authentication and authorization platform for modern protocols. And we can also integrate with APIs if we want to. So that's what we did. We decided to integrate Azure AD B2C with that. And these are some of the processes that we came up with. First of all, a new user, kid's going to come in, they're going to sign up for this. Well, there are different ways that they can do that. We do have the ability for using the NUCO intent 1, because there's an intent there. It can detect that, and it can detect the user based on their location, and that's one way of protecting the identity. The other way is we also provide the ability to I vet the identity using different things. A kid can upload his scanned list if he wants to verify his identity. Different ways to do that. Also, there's Dynamics 365 identity protection involved to prevent bots and other fraud mechanisms from coming in and trying to sign up for maybe some user or something. So there's the ability there to protect that. So anyway, the score analysis is based on however they're trying to identify themselves. And if the score is high enough, then we go ahead and associate that with their identity. So that their identity that they've created, which can either be a local account or a social account, that identity within the identity store is associated with that user, unique user that's determined by the API processes on the left there. So once they sign in, basically the same processes are involved, but there's also conditional access because maybe their account could be compromised. That's where the Dynamics 365 identity protection and the Azure conditional access comes in, because if their identity is compromised somehow, of course the intent one would probably detect that, but in the event that's down for some reason, then we have the identity protection and conditional access to be able to protect the signed in user, and then they can see their Dynamics 365 data that's exposed to them. User data modification, again, we come in, the user can authenticate, but there's an API interface with Azure AD B2C so that they can add users to their list, not users, but items to their list, update the location information all the way up until just before the final hours of Christmas Eve, they can make changes. This is one of the other aspects of B2C that was required, is the opt-out. So of course you have all these back-end processes of gathering the data of the kids and whether they're good or bad or not. But maybe they're there, but one of the interesting things about this is throughout this entire time, even though the elves monitor the kids, there's no real user identifiable data that's exposed outside of this pipeline. The elves know who they are, Santa Claus knows who they are, but there's no way to attach that externally into any type of process other than finally for the delivery process, it's delivered. And at that point, there's identifiable, but even then, there's no way to look at the data and say, hey, this is who it is. Well, when we go ahead and associate a user with this data, now all of a sudden you have identifiable data that's associated with these processes that's connected to like a real person. And the user may want to opt out, say, hey, you know what? You can still do this, go ahead, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. I know my kid signed up for it, but we remove this information. So basically what we do is we do remove it from the user identity store within B2C, but it still stays within the Dynamics 365 environment, but it's not necessarily associated with any user that you could detect or verify externally with a name, address, or anything like that. And this is a way that businesses actually do integrate B2C with their processes. They may have the store database and the user database for those orders for that user, but the actual identity information is an externally accessible through like B2C or another ID process. And if they want to be removed, like the GDPR stuff, they want their identities removed. Well, you can remove their identities, remove all that information, but you still need to keep the business stuff. You just don't want to necessarily associate it with the user. So that's a way that Azure AD B2C is really good with removing itself, removing that identity information from the actual business processes itself. So finally, this is the final Azure AD B2C integration. The user can register on the B2C tenant with the local or social account. There's different types of user verifications. You can scan a list, input the name and location, verification from an external website. Maybe you have another website that you connected with. If they're partners with the North Pole processes here, then you can keep your same ID, keep your same historical information, start with a new account. But anyway, B2C provides a really secure platform to be able to do all this. So after all that, the final solution design looks like this. We have basically disparate user data, disparate item data, as well as data from the manufacturing and location. Holly created the API interfaces, and through that, with Microsoft AI integration, we can create a unique user table, user item, product tables, location tables, and the Dynamics 365 can expose that to the business processes, and then we can provide an identity aspect to it to expose that data so that the end user can manipulate their data via Azure AD B2C, and that's pretty much the whole solution. And that concludes this presentation. And are there any questions at all? If there are no questions, I don't see any questions, then thank you for attending, and we hope you all have a great holiday. Thanks.